Here I go. Hi, everyone. Over to not me.
Uh, Hi everyone. A lot of folks are out today, but yes, this is the Jupyter Lab contributor call. So we got a few things on the agenda. I think we just go for it. Um, so first thing right now is Jeremy. You have a thing on the Jupyter Lab 4.7 release timeline.
Yeah, maybe it's the wrong meeting if we have low attendance today, but the idea was to discuss the release timeline for the next minor release of Jupyter Lab. So let me
Mhm.
check. Yeah, we had this issue open for something like 2 months, and maybe it's time to think about some release date. Um, so there is usually, like, I mean, not usually, but what happened in the past is sometimes we had like special events, conferences, and so on. So they were like kind of natural target dates. There is one happening in October, beginning of October. It's open source summit in Prague, in Europe. There will be a mini Jupyter event that day. So maybe that could be a good target date for that 7 release. And if that's okay with people, we can work on the timeline like backwards, as we usually do, like giving 1 or 2 weeks of RC. Same for the beta, and then probably this is going to take the full month of September. But yeah, so I linked to the issue. If no one has any objection on that, maybe we could try to aim for that date. But it's always possible to move it if people want to get some pull requests in before or make some other changes. So yeah, we have a couple of items listed, I think, in the issue, but also in the milestone. We don't need to address them all, but yeah, once people are happy with the release, it's good to start moving towards the beta. Yeah. Let me see. I think that's pretty much it.
Are there other changes that have already made it into the main branch that like are going to be released as part of this? I'm just looking at the wish list right now, but it's like kind of future looking. I'm just curious like if there's any uh like major feature or enhancement that's being added as part of this.
Yeah, a couple of enhancements. So we have 2 alpha releases so far. Uh,
Hmm.
so I know that there were a couple of improvements with, I mean, general improvements to the UI and the UX, quality of life improvements. It's also sometimes like a good time to make some updates to the some of the libraries that we use. I
Mm.
know personally I would like to get the new Extern.js 6.1, but we don't know yet if they would be ready on time because I think it's still beta for the Extern.js. So we updated to Extern 6.0, but let's see if they release 6.1 in before October. And then yeah, I think as usual, it depends on what people would like to get in that release.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Um, Yeah, I don't have anything that could really make it realistically by the release timeline. I mean, do you have like a date to propose or like I think you were saying like we could target the open source summit Europe like before like one of the main events at the end of this year. So that would be like what that's like in October, right? Um yeah,
Beginning
so
of
like
October.
Yeah. We got like 2 months. Yeah. I don't think I'm working on something, but I don't think it's gonna make it in here officially. I'll cover that later in the call, but yeah, I think it's just gonna be a Jupyter AI thing for the short term, but I would love to contribute it to Jupyter Lab officially long term. Um, Nick posted some comments. I don't have context on this. Nick is much smarter than me when it so I'm just gonna paste this into the HackMD so we don't forget about it.
Yeah, the issue tag there is from like March when RJSF 6 came out. They've done a bunch of releases since then, fixed a lot of bugs. But the big one just came out last week, and it is a validator that uses a the Cloudflare JSON schema validator, which supports all the same stuff, but it doesn't use eval or new function, which is what AJV relies on for building stuff, which we do in a couple other places. Like Jupyter Server uses fast JSON schema. It does the same thing. It generates code and then runs the code. But in the context of the browser, if you run this in a lockdown environment that has unsafe eval set in your CORS headers, Jupyter Lab doesn't open. So people have to add exceptions for Jupyter Lab, which already sounds kind of gross. I know for a fact that there's other things that use new function and eval and stuff like that. So I'm not sure. I don't know if that's going to really move the dial much, but something would work. And of course, it's all ridiculous because, tools for interactive computing means, uh, you know, remote execution as a service. So take all that with a grain of salt for security, but it is one of the real boxes provided by the browsers that you can use to say we are trying to do something more secure than just run whatever the hell you want wherever you want it.
Hmm. Yeah, like I didn't even know that you could disable um unsafe eval, but yeah, that makes sense. It is kind of a foot gun that everybody learns about. Um, yeah, that would be pretty sweet. Um, cool. Thanks for bringing that up, Nick. Anything else regarding the Jupyter Lab 4.7 release? Any other ideas?
Um,
Um,
but there is
go-
also the Notebook 7.7 release that will be released almost at the same time. So I've opened a couple of pull requests to do a few improvements there, but it's the same, like same idea. I think if people think there should be things to add for that release in Notebook or even in Jupyter Live, because in the end, these three projects, they kind of follow the same release cycle nowadays. So that extends to, yeah, Notebook and Lite as well. That's it. Yeah, maybe we can move on. I don't know who is next. Kirsty, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Okay, so actually, the first thing that I wanted to do is just quickly introduce myself and maybe explain why I joined these meetings now, and it will blend into the Bio Jupyter and Litecoin roles that we have at BIDS. So my name is Kirsty. I'm the executive director for the Berkeley Institute for Data Science. Fernando is our faculty director, so you can think of Fernando as having the vision, and it's my job to like keep the train on the tracks and actually make it happen. I did my PhD here at Berkeley, and I have some experience that's sort of Jupyter Hub kind of related. So I've been in the Jupyter Hub world for a few years now. I also work on the Jupyter Book project, and so that's sort of where I've been in Jupyter. But we are hiring. So Fernando just landed a very large, or collaboratively landed because it's part of a very big program, a large philanthropic gift to build what we're calling BioJupyter. Now, BioJupyter is actually sort of not not one thing. It's a modular kind of piece of infrastructure to serve people doing biomedical research, AI enabled, and making sure that one of the things that he's very excited about for this work is helping people to use different data sets or sort of move between different compute infrastructure. So if any of you have been around the community for a while, if you've ever heard him talk about the concept of solar, we're sort of folding this in. And solar is this idea of like multiple Jupyter hubs orbiting something so that you can connect up these different infrastructure. There's elements of secure compute. There's elements of allowing people to use AI. Like, what does that mean for biomedical sciences in lots of different ways? And then and so what we have, and sorry, I've put some links in the HackMD and I can copy and paste them into the Zoom chat when I've stopped speaking. There are 4 roles that we're recruiting for at the moment for BioJupyter. They're actually all the same base role. We're calling it open source research software engineer. And there is one that is a computational infrastructure role, and you can think about that as being sort of Jupyter Hub kind of coded. There's one that we're calling agentic AI, and you can think about that as being Jupyter AI kind of and broader encoded. And then there's one that we're calling user interfaces, and that one you can think of as being Jupyter Lab sort of coded. And I'm saying coded because it's not necessarily the case that the people working on these roles will definitely work on Jupyter Hub, Jupyter AI, and Jupyter Lab, but it's a pretty high probability that they will. That's like part of the design. The 4th role is what we're calling, so it's an open source research software engineer, but focused on product. So that is actually someone that sort of was originally kind of a community manager sort of coded, but we have decided to make them more software engineering. And the goal is that that person will go and be embedded in different research groups and really make sure that we're understanding exactly what they need. And then they will write specifications, requirements. They'll iterate as sort of quickly as possible across all of those different flavors. So those are 4 roles. They're all for BioJupyter. We also have another project, which is called Lightcone, and this one is funded by Eric and Wendy Schmidt. And Lightcone is thinking about specifications for tracking provenance through agentic workflows. So those of us that are in the Jupyter community will have been thinking about reproducibility for like forever. And this is actually a sort of like reproducibility in the agentic world. And so there are 2 roles being hired for that program. One is what they're calling a research software engineer, and that one will also have some, I think probably like Jupyter Hub. It's definitely got kind of how do you move people from, how do you give people the same experience but working on different infrastructure? And then they also have a product role as well. So we have 2 product roles, and the focus there is like making sure that what we build is really actually useful and used. The positions are not remote. They are all here at Berkeley. And there's lots of information in the job descriptions. So those were hiring. And I think I didn't finish the sentence, but basically I will be line managing people who I hope will be contributing meaningfully to this meeting and these communities. And so I know very little about Jupyter Lab. I know very little about Jupyter AI, although David gave us an extremely comprehensive overview at the workshop in San Francisco a few months ago. So I'm mostly here to make sure I'm learning, and then the goal is to obviously select the best people and have them be constructive, collaborative members of the community as well. So yeah, happy to answer any questions, but that's my sort of notice.
Thanks for bringing this up, Christy. This is super cool, and I'm really curious how long it took to set all of this up because it seems like it was a tremendous amount of work. But I think like yeah, like having more contributors to a project is super welcome, and I think it will help us like build Jupyter in a way that's also like more useful for like science and research staff. And I think there's a pretty neat story there, right? About like basically force multiplying the impact of like science being done already. that's a great story. I mean, I'm just curious, like historically, is this like the first time you all have hired open source research software engineers, or is it like, yeah, you've already done this before?
So BIDS has a history of contributing to open source, particularly. So Min, for example, was here at BIDS, and so Jupyter Hub came out of BIDS in the past. There's been quite a lot of contributors to the scientific Python ecosystem. So Jared Millman and Stefan van der Welt both work here, and they've had various different people that have been part of their teams going forward. So no, so BIDS's sort of whole mission is around contributing to the scientific open source ecosystem. The thing that's actually new, and this is getting a bit nerdy, is actually the concept of a research software engineer. So I worked in the UK, and in the UK and in Europe, the concept of a research software engineer is more sort of advanced. And I am the open source is not new. The concept of a research software engineer who has like a sort of long-term role, but maybe works on different projects as funding changes, that's
Mm,
newer a bit, but that's a big passion of mine.
mm, cool. Yeah, I was mainly asking because I'm curious, like, how long do you think it would take to find people for these roles? But
I mean,
I
I
guess
think
we'll
we're
just
going
see.
to get hundreds and hundreds of applications. I mean, we already are
Oh
getting,
wow.
so we have 6 roles open and I'm the hiring manager for all of them, which is crazy town. So we're also going to have 2 program manager positions that will open up, and then that will sort of scale everything a little bit better. Um, but I think we're going to get at least 250 applications for each of these roles. So whether they
Mm,
are super high quality applications, it's really it's the super high quality like candidates that we're really keen for anyone in this community to share, reach out, put them in touch with me. I'm super happy to answer any questions
mhm.
because it is a
Awesome.
little bit unicorny in terms of like you have to know what the biologists sort of want. Ideally, we want people to know the Jupyter ecosystem. We need people to know norms of what it means to contribute to a multi-stakeholder governed open source project. And we can train on
Hmm.
some of those axes, but we can't train on all of them.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know of any folks off the top of my head who would be a good fit, or at least like people who don't already have jobs, but I'll keep thinking about it. We could promote this on like some of the other like packages throughout the ecosystem. Like I could put a note in the README or something, just like a banner that's like, hey, Bits is hiring, by the way, wink, wink, right? Like we could do something like that. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of the promotion might just be on LinkedIn as well.
I didn't put the
Uh,
LinkedIn links. They're in the Zulip post. So the Zulip post is like super long and has like millions of things inside of it. But yeah,
nice.
yeah. So yeah, and actually there's another link that's also in the Zulip post, which actually explains what BioJupyter is. And that's also so even for people who have jobs, please have a look at that because our goal is to build something that is useful for biomedical scientists and also obviously good citizens of the Jupyter ecosystem as well. Cool. I think that's me
Alrighty.
done, and folks can ping me. I hang out on Zulip a lot, so Zulip's a great way to get in touch with me. But you can try and email me, and I will maybe reply to that. I'm much better on Zulip.
Sounds good. Thank you, Kirsty. Nicola, I think you're up next on the agenda.
Yes. Hello. So I just wanted to talk a bit about a PR that I opened, I think 2 months ago. Just put the link in the chat and the related issue also. So it's about the content manager, the default content manager in Jupyter Lab. The thing is that it behaves differently whether you put some option when you call it or not. So that means if you add any option when expecting to get a file, you will not have the content except if you explicitly request the content. But if you do not put any option, you will have the content. So the PR fixed it. It's a really small fix. But the issue is that it actually a breaking change because maybe extension may rely on this behavior to get the content of a file. So Mike suggests on Zulip to start a deprecation cycle, but I don't really know how we can do that because we can also get the file without expecting the content, and it's a regular request. So to have a deprecation on it, we need to check if we get the file without any option and then try to get the content. So I don't think it's possible. I don't know, maybe. Yeah, and that's pretty it. So I don't know if some people have some idea how we can handle it properly. I try in the PR, I added a comment. I tried naively to get the extension that could rely on this behavior, but it's really naive. So I guess I probably missed some of them. And yeah.
So it's a bug in Jupyter Lab, right? Like, is the Jupyter Server API supposed
No,
to work this way, right?
so
Or not?
Jupyter Server is returning the content by default. But Jupyter Lab set the content to false, and it's explicitly said in the doc
Okay.
that the content is not expected if you do not explicitly request it. But it's not working like that all the time. Yeah, but this is a bug in Jupyter Lab. I think the bug is not in Jupyter Lite. It's only Jupyter Lab, I think. So yeah, sorry, but just wanted to add if people have idea how we can handle it properly, you can add comment in the PR in the issue as well.
Mhm. Yeah. My only concern with this is like it's a pretty major change. Like I get that like it's a breaking change, right? But it's a pretty major breaking change, right? Like the contents API is probably like the first AP at least for me as a contributor, that was the first API I figured out how to use because it's like such a fundamental thing, like getting files from the file system and like changing the default behavior of that API just seems a little sketch.
It's not the
But
default behavior, right? Because by default, if you don't pass the options, it just behaves normally, right?
No, if you don't pass the option, you will have the content where you are not supposed to have it. And if you pass any option other than the content, you will not have the content. You have the issue in the, you can see you have two
Okay, I will
examples in
check
the
that.
issue.
Mm.
You can
yeah,
see it.
Yeah,
So
I
it's quick.
we've made a mistake. We've shipped a Boolean that we're treating like its opposite, sort of. Maybe what we should do is add a new Boolean that's the antonym. So instead of include content, we add like an exclude, right? And then we have that be the correct one and make the original content one be deprecated or something like that so that you can ship the behavior you need to have by saying I explicitly want to exclude because you're the one who wants the behavior that's broken, and everyone else who's relying on the current behavior that to their mind is correct but is API broken gets the API sort of changed around them so they get what they want by default, and we don't have to wait until Jupyter Lab 5 to ship it. We just deprecate the content attribute and we keep the new exclude or something like that. We can decide. We could even add exclude and add it deprecated, saying in Jupyter Lab 5, this switches or whatever we want. But that way you don't have to like fight over the meaning of the content parameter so that it doesn't become backward compatible. You can ship it today.
So and then when you change the default behavior, so that if you don't have exclude content, you will have the content.
We changed the default documentation's description of the default behavior, right? Like it's already the default behavior, but the documentation says it's the opposite. So we just change the documentation to say, no,
Yeah,
from now on, without it, this is what happens.
yeah, but you need also to under. So in some case, it do not return the content. So it's
Yeah,
so
that's
we need
right.
to change it also. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we need to add a parameter called exclude, and we need to redocument what we say content means today. And then because we will have two things, we can ship the behavior and have the behavior cleanly visible in your code. Your code will say exclude equals true, right? But we could also decide, do we want to keep exclude after version 5, or do we want to throw away content, or do we need both? And we can add a deprecating tag to one of those params for version 5 behavior changing. So that way today we get the behavior, we have one ugly new parameter, and then tomorrow we get rid of the ugly parameter.
Okay.
It's tough to say, David. I kind of agree with you. On the other hand, it's like um there's an HTTP verb for this, right? That the contents manager doesn't have. So it's like it could treat the top level thing being a head request and not a get request, or it can read, and so I don't know. I sort of see the case for why the default was originally meant to be the lowest bandwidth one. But on the other hand, I also see how it came to be that it was implemented the exact opposite of that, because both intuitions kind of make sense.
Mhm.
But obviously they're incompatible with each other, so we have a problem now.
So like the contention is that the server side default is content equals false, but the front end analog has content defaulting to true. Is that like the contention here?
That's how I understood it. Is that correct, Nicola?
But
Sorry, I did not understand. Sorry.
So is it the case that the default for Jupyter Server is that content equals false, but the default for Jupyter Lab is that content equals true, even though it's supposed to be defaulting to false? Is that what's happening?
It's the opposite. Content is true on server, as far as I remember. And default on Jupyter Lab is supposed to be false, but it's not always false. So the thing is that if there is no option, the content option is not sent to the server, so the server sends the default,
Mhm.
and the default is the content is to return the content. But if we change this behavior on Jupyter Lab, we need to change it also on Jupyter Lite in the same version, I guess. So I need to make sure that Jupyter Lite do it properly, but I think the content is not returned by default in Jupyter Lite. So we need
Yeah,
to
but
keep
why
the
not?
same behavior.
I'm just curious though, why not just keep things the way they are? It sounds like I get that like if you don't pass content equals false, you get the content today. But isn't that also just following the default of Jupyter Server, right? Like the front end is not sending anything, right? It just leaves content totally unset. It doesn't say if it's true or false. Then in that case, shouldn't it just use the server's default in case that flag is not set and that's already the current behavior? Like
Yeah,
I guess
it, it,
like
it, it, it will be the easiest and the more logic, I guess. But I think there is a story behind that. I don't really know why the content is not default to true. But yeah,
yeah, like I feel
Well,
like
I'm sorry. I'm just imagining the cases where someone got burned because there was like even a modestly sized 100 megabyte CSV. It's gigantic when you're in your web browser. It could just be the case that they were trying to be defensive about the kind of files being opened over this kind of connection. I don't know. One way or another, a change needs to be made because a claim is made in the docs about this parameter and that claim is not being matched, right? So the question becomes, do we just declare that actually the behavior of this parameter is such that if you omit it, it doesn't mean false. You have to explicitly say, which is fine. Or do we treat it like whatever the intention we wrote down there is the intention of the API? So the API is wrong. We repair the API. I don't know. Yeah, you list first. It's true. And like, um, it could be, I don't know, somebody did a right click or something and was trying to get some metadata to render the context menu, and they did the wrong one and it blew up. They just wanted a head request and instead they got the whole CSV. I don't know. But okay, so here's the thing though, right? Nicolas' PR has been open for 2 months. So at the very least, if we're like casting doubt, we should give him a plan for for how to get out of it, right? Like what should we do?
So maybe also another option is just to do nothing and wait for the version 5 of Jupyter Lab to fix it. I think if it can break any extension, so I don't know. It may be an option. So maybe we can discuss it on the PR on the issue. I don't have any hurry about that. Just to try to move forward sometime.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like my earlier objections, I think I'm not fully understanding the motivation. So like I want to point out like Nicola put a pretty detailed issue here that's linked to the PR. And I do see the problem. Like I thought it was like, oh, we're just changing a default because like we want to, but like there is like some slightly weird, inconsistent behavior that seems like is definitely weird and not that is not intentional. Um, so with that being said, I don't I think I withdraw my objections. I need to understand the actual issue a bit more closely. But yeah, like I think my take on it is like if we are inclined to think like the existing behavior was a bug, then we can fix it in a minor version, right? But if it's like really clear that this is like sort of like opinionated or subjective in some way, and like we're just changing the default to align with what we think makes sense, then I think it should go in a major version. That's my personal take. But again, I'll review this. I'll try to find some time to review it. The Jupyter AI stuff has been taking a lot of time away from me, but I do want to be able to contribute and help you find a path forward for this because you put a lot of work into this. Thank you, Nicola. Um, yeah, Jason brings up a good point. Like maybe like one thing that would be helpful is like show what is the like give some example scenarios and like what's old and what's new. I think that could be good.
Yeah, I love that the PR with that.
Yeah. Alrighty. Yeah, thank you, Nicola. Alrighty. I don't see any other Jupyter Lab topics on the agenda, and we are just perfectly on time for the AI topics, which usually start at 9:45. So I do have a few updates on Jupyter AI 3.2, where we are basically making RTC optional. And just to remind folks, like the reason this is coming through is because like what we're finding is that we have a lot of reports that are saying, hey, the RTC stuff, like with JSD, it works fine, but it's like failing in remote deployments. And definitely like it could be JSD as well, almost certainly is. And so like basically what we want to do in 3.2 is not just allow, like we want to allow, first of all, to not use JSD and just use Jupyter Collaboration. I think that's a good choice. And like, I think the fact that we chose our own RTC provider caused a lot of contention, and it wasn't our call to make. So we want to roll that back and let people use Jupyter Collaboration if they want to use RTC with AI. But at the same time, we also want to give admins like a fallback path where if they find right now, like the place this is coming from is like what happens if an admin sees different bugs in the two different providers, right? Obviously, we should work together and merge like the fixes and lessons learned into a single collaboration provider that like is very stable and production ready. But I think like it's just historically been really hard to get RTC right. And right now, if like people keep running into RTC bugs, whether they be from Jupyter Server documents or Jupyter Collaboration, they have basically no fallback other than to install Jupyter AI or uninstall Jupyter AI. So yeah, like we would like to basically support all three paths. We have the old path, the new path with Jupyter Collaboration to provide RTC instead, and then a third path that is no RTC. So this has been basically, long story short, we rely on RTC for two things. We rely on it to provide the live content updates in the UI. So right now in Jupyter Lab, there is no way to basically see the UI update in real time when an AI agent edits a file on disk. Without RTC, there's no other way that we're aware of. There have been some other hobby projects that have been put together, but none of them are like in any official or semi-official capacity. And the other part is the chat part. So we are also like adding a way for Jupyter Chat to work without RTC, because right now it relies on a YDoc to represent a chat. So yeah, this is has been a tremendous amount of work, but we're making good progress, and I really hope to get a pre-release out by this Friday. Yeah, so I do have a couple of updates there. I apologize, I did not have time to put together a demo video for this, but I am going to share this design over here. So the live content, we're working on a way to basically show live content inside of Jupyter Lab without RTC. So basically providing like a simpler way to do live content that doesn't require RTC. And again, like the goal here is not to reinvent RTC. That is absolutely not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do here is basically like provide some fallback for this feature that admins can use in case our RTC doesn't work in their deployment for some reason. So basically what the current main branch has is like really, really, really simple and kind of dumb. So basically, whenever there is a change, we use watch files, which is like this Rust-based library that listens to file system changes using file system notifications APIs, which are provided by the kernel or operating system. So it's super fast. And what this basically allows us to do is like whenever we detect a file changed, we just call context.revert. So it's the exact same as like when you see a conflict resolution dialog, you click revert to disk. It basically just reloads from disk. So very, very naive implementation. And there's some problems with that, like you lose scroll position or whatever. So the next step is to like see how we can update notebooks incrementally. So one of the challenges with this is like basically if you're in a notebook, right, reloading the document widget is pretty dangerous because you can lose, not only can you lose the scroll position, which is really annoying, but if you had something that was like running a long running input, you kind of lose the kernel state there and a few other things. So basically what we want to do is like make a way such that we can basically intelligently insert cells and move cells around and edit cells while also not clobbering any of the user's local edits. And the way to do this is a bit complicated, but the long story short is you can basically hash every single cell, like the content of every cell, just the content and the metadata for every single cell. And then whenever there's an update on the file system, the server recomputes the hashes for every input cell and sends them over to wire. And these all have cell IDs as well. And then, so like using the hashes, you can tell which cells changed. And to minimize the number of like operations we apply to the notebook, where we are moving cells and editing cells, you can use this longest common subsequence algorithm, also known as diffing, where you basically we use the Myers algorithm to basically minimize the number of edits. Jeremy raises a good point. I would argue against that because like we are not trying to support again, like one of the explicit non-goals is that we're not trying to re-implement CRDTs or RTC. What we're trying to do is like basically figure out like what are the minimum pieces just to provide the server to client synchronization. So in other words, the server to client part should be real time, but we're not doing client to client and we're not doing client to server. So the
Yeah.
key here is like, yeah, we're not auto saving either.
No,
So
yeah,
all
I know,
saves are
but
still manual.
yeah, but the way you were
Mhm.
describing it, it sounded like, I mean, the logic sounds a little bit complex. So I was thinking like, it would be not funny, but it would be interesting, like if we end up, like handling more and more edge cases as we discover them, right, in this RTC-free mode. And yeah, just wondering like where we should stop maybe in terms of complexity, right, of implementation, because
Yeah,
if we, yeah,
I
because
If you
this
guys
absolutely.
may also
will,
bring some risk. Yeah.
if you'll afford me an old man story, a long time ago, I thought I would capture the state of a live application by doing an MD5 checksum against some state blob and shipping that and using that on the front end. The trouble was the language I was doing that wasn't like doing that calculation natively. So it was using up the JavaScript thread in like, super slow implementation. And it brought
Yeah.
down my server just trying to do these hash calculations. So there are like
Mhm.
more and less trivial choices to be made, and like the value of them needs to be considered. Like there are ways to actually build something totally plausible that ends up like costing too much. So it's worth considering like how am I actually capturing the change? That's all you're really trying to do, right? You're trying to capture like what is the headers for a diff instead of like the full diff. How do you do that cheaply? So it's,
Mhm.
like I'm not saying this as a positive or a negative aspect of this architecture. It's just a real consideration.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a consideration like I weighed very heavily. And that's why like I was really trying to go with the idea of like, can we just always do context.revert, right? Like don't even try to do any diffing, don't even try to do any hashing, like just keep it really simple. And then I got some feedback from Mike, and Mike was basically he gave me this long list of reasons why that would break the notebook experience. And I read through that and I was able to reproduce some of it. And I was like, okay, you know what? Yeah, that's true. That's fair. So like at least, but I think the saving grace is that like one one thing that I did make sure to incorporate in this design is exactly that performance consideration because there I don't know if you all have solved this, but there is an issue open in Jupyter YDoc where basically they are trying to do some diffing on like plain text files. And they have also run into scenarios where that crashes a server because people can just try to open a 100 megabyte file, right? And like a log file or something. And then it's trying to diff 100 megabytes of text. It's going to be a bad time. Um, so, like, there are a few things, right? So, one of the design aspects is that all of the hashing is done in worker threads on both the front end and the back end. And what I mean by that is that the Rust implementation, so we use the Blake 3 hashing algorithm, which is, as far as I can tell, based on my like limited research and knowledge on this subject, is the fastest hashing implementation that is available today. It's on PyPI, Conda Forge, and NPM. And what we can do is like, because the Python library is backed by a Rust library, the hashing logic doesn't hold the, it doesn't hold the global interpreter block, meaning that these can run in separate worker threads. So that is done sort of asynchronously. And simultaneously on the front end, we can basically debounce like how often we hash a cell in response to user edits. And that is done through web workers. So the idea is that like hopefully by delegating this to like worker threads and not blocking the main thread with expensive hash computations, and by using a super fast version of this, hopefully like that is mitigated. And I think like part of the criteria that really determines whether this is actually going to be something we ship is like performance testing, right? Like we have to test on like a really big notebook and see exactly what can go wrong and like basically push this thing until it breaks. And I guess the bar here is like, well, let's first figure out what the limits of vanilla Jupyter Lab are first, and then see how far that bar gets lowered by this implementation. If it's like roughly the same, right? I think we can have good confidence that this this is at least like from a performance perspective not breaking. And another thing is like to avoid the issue of like, oh goodness, what happens if like something is fundamentally wrong with the algorithm and then it causes like this data loss scenario that people have run into with JSD and RTC historically. Like again, we don't do any auto saving. So the user always has the option to revert if their local edits conflict with what's on disk. And they can use notebook checkpoints as well to roll back. So hopefully that will mitigate things. Again, we need to do more testing on it. The design, I did write this like myself. I did use an AI, but like I steered it for like 4 hours and I reviewed every single sentence. The PR, on the other hand, totally AI generated. I need to go through that and review that. So I'm not saying like the current PR is ready as is, but it's more like um, I think like it's a pretty promising proof of concept. And I will upload demo videos on that PR as well. Um, it works pretty well so far. Um, Vincent, sorry, you've had your hand up for a while. There's just a lot to talk about. You want to go?
Yeah, so I think the CRD and or the JSD we has been used in our organizations, so it's very helpful for stable the user's experience during the networking disconnected interruptions. So because it's
Mhm.
keeping the model in the backend in the server. So the servers, the kernel has more stable connections, but the browsers to the Jupyter server, the connections is easier to be disrupted, uh, because we have a lot of long-running shell. The shell will easily run for hours. So this JSD is very helpful in our use cases. So if
Mhm.
I'm wondering the the bug in this JSD architecture, is it because the multiple clients connect to the same document during the real-time collaboration that caused the problem? If we don't use multiple clients, will the JSD functional properly?
This is a great question.
Mhm.
Really gets to the heart of the problem. The
Okay.
answer is we're not sure.
Okay.
And like part of the reason we want to decouple this is like
Uh-huh.
right now, anytime there's like a bug in JSD, it's like a critical bug for Jupyter AI, even if not everyone runs into it.
Mm-hmm.
And like what we're finding is like I know you all have had great success with it, Zach has had good success with it,
Mm-hmm.
but then other people like they install it and immediately see like some sort of data loss. So what we're thinking is like there is something deployment specific, environment specific, platform, file system, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think there's like complex interactions with like different network topologies and deployment configurations that
Yeah.
that cause JSD to like
Mhm.
JSD is not like sufficiently fault tolerant is what we're finding. It works great in isolation and in isolated circumstances, thankfully yours, like it works well.
Mhm.
But like in general, there are definitely some issues with it that we're seeing. And we're seeing that on our side right now, and it's pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that possible we work offline to reproduce those bug or those failure case
I've had,
instead
I
of just
am,
hear somebody complain about that?
yeah, I mean, I have like, so like one condition we found is like on some platforms, right? So like
Hmm.
Jupyter Server documents, we save files when the server shuts down. And if the server is not shut down gracefully, like it gets force killed,
Hmm.
sometimes on certain file systems, that that interrupted file write through the contents manager results in a 0 byte file. And we
Hmm.
still don't know why that's the case because Jupyter Server by default it uses this atomic write configuration where it's like it has this atomic write feature where
Hmm.
basically it's like always it's like creating a temporary file then moving it back and it's f syncing the whole time to basically ensure like even if you kill the power halfway it's always you're never going to lose data. But we have found that in certain deployments, that's not always true. And I don't know if it's Jupyter Server or not, or if it's because of this specific deployment, but we did manage to reproduce that.
Hmm.
But then I have other people I have Adam at the Vera Rubin Observatory who says
Hmm.
they see the same bug and then they made sure they triple checked that like the server is being stopped gracefully and none of the writes file system writes are being killed halfway through.
Hmm.
So I don't really know what's going on for that. And then at the same time we have other people who are reporting like you run a notebook that's like takes a really long time to run, like let's say like a few like several hours, right? And then
Hmm.
halfway through the notebook gets like reset to an empty state and everything's lost.
Hmm.
And I we have tried to reproduce that. Like we don't like, and I have like multiple engineers on my side who
Hmm.
I have basically been telling like, hey, try to reproduce these. You know, I
Hmm.
we have like three or four people like literally that's like their day job that's been their day job for like last week and the week before, and we have not been able to reproduce all these
Hmm.
conditions. So with that said, right, it's like if we could reproduce them, we would absolutely share them with the community and work with them to find a fix. But the tricky thing is like I don't know why it's failing. We don't know why, and it's like it seems it would take a long time. Like, and that's why like and like what happens if we fix all of these bugs that we found out about and then there's like more unknown bugs lurking, right?
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think there needs to be some kind of fallback for Jupyter AI, right?
Hmm. So will that be because the backend, the notebook files get updated from the other channel? So it's not go through the JSD, so it will cause the conflict, right? Because
It could be, but in either
it's the
case, it shouldn't
same.
just like kill it.
It's like the cache, right? The JSD, the CRD, CD is like a cache of the actual file. If you have
Mm,
write-through cache, everyone write into the cache first and flush to the file, and the there's a central place to resolve the conflict. But if you write directly to the file, and the cache will become stale, and then you want to resolve the conflict, it's kind of after the fact, and it's hard.
yeah, it could be something like
So
that, but we do
so
handle
is it?
out-of-band edits,
Yeah.
and we have tests covering that.
So is it just because we need to centralize all the edits in the CRCD? Not we don't allow the edit on the file directly.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good argument for that, right? Like, do we even want to handle out-of-band changes? Like,
Mhm.
I think that would be
So
a really controversial thing, but
um,
yeah, like,
if we take out of the CRCD, how does the AI, the agents modification work
um,
out of the band? So
yeah, so
without this
like
one, if
that's
the AI modify the file when the users open the file, open the notebooks, and how does the user see the change?
So that's what Jupyter Lab Live content is supposed to do, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so like we're providing a different way to do out of band files, but or out support show like
Mhm.
out of band changes. Again, out of band changes are just changes directly made directly to the file. It's not going through Contents Manager, just literally just edit the file on disk.
Mhm.
And basically that's what the Jupyter Lab Live content is supposed to do in a simpler way, where we only basically broadcast like these hashes that basically tell the client what's changed on disk. And then the client basically, what we do is like we determine if the
Mhm.
new content can be reconciled. So for example, if the AI agent only adds a bunch of cells to the bottom and they
Mhm.
like, let's say the note user has a notebook and they're just editing stuff, the AI agent adds a bunch of cells. Well, that's a purely additive change. So we know that change can be reconciled. But if
Mhm.
the user's already made changes to a cell and then the AI agent overwrites them, then the client's going to refuse that change because it knows that like its edits conflict with what is
Mhm.
available on with what's
Mhm.
available.
Yeah.
So so like nothing changes for the user except when they try to save the file, it's going to show you a conflict resolution that says, hey, files have changed on disk, right?
So yeah,
So
that's the yeah. What happens if there's a concurrent modification on the files by multiple agents? Because right now, one agent can spin up multiple sub-agents. Sub-agents can go and modify the same notebook content.
it's handled the exact same way. It's like
Okay.
we don't have a way of tracking the identity of who made like a direct file edit, right? So like it just
Yeah.
looks like multiple file edits. And as long as they can all be reconciled, then that's fine. Um, yeah. I think we need to think through that more. I mean, what happens if one person makes an edit and then the other person makes an edit that overwrites that? Then I think in that case, like only the first edit would make it update your UI, and then the second one would not update your UI. And then you would see that conflict resolution dialog. Um, but yeah, so all that is to say is like it is a bit tricky, but I do think that this is going to be at least safer in a way because I think that we can provide a stronger safety guarantee with Jupyter Lab Live content, even though it is complex and definitely like a greenfield project where we haven't really explored this um, and we haven't tested in production. But at the same time, one of the nice things about this is like we are not touching the file save and flow at all. So what this should provide in principle is that like even if data loss does occur, it's going to be limited to the client side. Like the server file system is not going to have data loss. And when you try to save that from the client, it's going to bring you a dialog that says like, do you want to revert back to disk? And if they experience data loss, they should click revert. And we also show a little notification pop-up that basically happens whenever an out of bounds change is made. And that also has a revert button. So it's pretty easy to undo. And even like basically the goal is that even if they save it by accident, the notebook checkpoint will still provide them a fallback that lets them roll back to the previous state before they saved. That is the goal. Um, so yeah, like basically we're not touching the file saving loop at all. We're not touching anything to do with like saving to disk. We're only reading from disk and then like the server sends data to the web client that basically tells them how to update their UI. So in principle, this should be safer. Uh, that is like the design goal of Jupyter Lab Live content is to provide like a really safe and robust way to update live content in the UI through the file system without with like basically providing some level of guarantee that there's never going to be some catastrophic bug that happens in your remote deployment. Jason.
I just want to be
Uh,
clear about the assumptions, I think, here, because we started with we're trying to decouple Jupyter AI and RTC. And then, of course, like this conversation has revolved around essentially propagating changes on the file system to the front end. Um, how critical is propagating changes from the file system to the front end to decoupling Jupyter AI from RTC? The link in my head is the AI models are modifying the files on disk. And so we need to propagate those changes to the front end to get the AI changes. Is that the one link that we're trying to solve here?
Yeah. Yeah, basically. So like with a couple of caveats, right? Like we can change the Jupyter AI agents to do so in a way that doesn't edit the files on disk. But
Right.
then,
Okay. That was my question, basically.
yeah,
Can
we
we
could,
avoid the whole question here?
but you still need some way like Jupyter Lab Live content because there's no other way to update the UI without RTC and Jupyter Lab today. So you still need something like that. Like you wouldn't need the file watcher, right? But you would still need some way to basically send an update to the client and then have the client update its UI in real time. So
Right.
it's still necessary even if like we configure our agents to not write to disk, right?
Right. But if we can if the agents can meet us halfway, the agents are sort of want to change something. If they can generate these patches or something, if we can get we can, I guess if you're trying to say agent change some state that
Yeah.
you see, right? And so what
Mm-hmm.
state do they see? Right now we say it's the file on disk. So essentially we've copied the state from the front end to the server, and now the agent can see that state. If there's some way the agent can see the state and it can send the diffs, can we push more into the agent in order
But then
to make the problem easier on us?
But then that brings us back to real-time collaboration because
Yeah.
then you need to have a bi-directional sync, right? You have to sync the client state to the server because the agents live on the server. So
Yeah.
like that's where things get tricky, right? So like what I'm proposing is like what the Jupyter AI agents do is like they just send these updates. They don't write anything to disk. They just send the update to this update object to the
Yeah.
client. And the
Yeah.
every client gets an updated UI,
Yeah.
and then they can save.
So it's basically just not real-time syncing. Like it's not real-time collaboration. Like you're
It's
inventing
one way.
RTC
It's no, no,
without
no,
the
no.
R.
Yeah, well, it's going to be real time, but like the key is that like it's like it's not collaboration. It's server to client, right? It's one way, it's a one-way transaction.
Yeah.
And then like when the client saves, it's the exact same flow. That's like the experience we're trying to build. We're not handling client to client. We're not handling client to server. It's literally just push the update from server to
The whole
client.
system is non-real-time collaboration, right? Like the save is your backwards channel back down to the
Yeah,
server. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Something like
Sure.
that.
Is it
Yeah.
boiled
So
down to the concurrent write? So
say again.
there is a concurrent writings, right? Doesn't matter if it's from the client or from the kernel execution output or the agent. They are concurrently writing to a notebook. So if you allow to write into the memory model, at the same time allow to write into the file, these two locations can cause conflict. So you have the central place, like you need to write through
Yeah.
a model.
But
Everyone write through the model and flush to the file.
so I guess here there are multiple things. Like trying to answer your first question, Jason, like what happens like if you work with an agent right now, it's going to be very annoying because it's going to use its default tools and that act directly on the file system, right? And then you get these pop-ups that always ask you to override or revert. There is an option available, I think, to meet with the agent halfway. That's the approach we're using in Jupyter Lite AI, which is to use the Jupyter Lab commands. And that goes through the event system. And then the trade-off here is that you have to tell and teach your agent to use some other tools than the default ones to edit files. And that's sometimes annoying depending on the coding agent. But if they have this channel, then everything goes through the event system. And then goes back to your front end and just makes edits like if you were doing the edits yourself. That's how it works in Jupyter AI. I've used that several times with a regular agent. So you need two components. The first one is the Jupyter MCP server, Jupyter Server MCP, which creates this entry point for the agent. So it knows about those tools. And then the bridge, which is the commands toolkit, Jupyter Lab commands toolkit, which is the part with the event system, the Jupyter Lab event system. So then everything ends up being just calls, coding Jupyter Lab commands in the front end directly. So the agents will not modify the files, right? So that's I don't know if it's worth trying, because like I was saying, that the main trade-off is, unfortunately, is kind of going against how agents work naturally, like by default, right? They just want to access the files directly on disk.
Yeah.
That's the main the main problem. Yeah.
And we can try to make ways to guard against that, but like I feel like we still want some story around update file on disk and then it updates the UI.
But
Because
maybe that
otherwise,
story depends on RTC working.
Yeah.
So we sort
So-
of have this API. MBCLI, right, is essentially providing an API for modifying a notebook, adding a cell, editing a cell, etc. The MBCLI could just, instead of writing to disk, could send changes. It already has an RTC mode, right, that essentially just changes the model instead of writing to disk. And we could give feedback to the agent, like agent says add a cell, right? Okay, maybe through MBCLI or however, whatever this API looks like. And then that's a synchronous thing that gets back to the agent about whether that was successful or not. And so then the agent's doing essentially the conflict resolution. The agent proposes a change, it goes to the front end, tries to merge in. If it can't, and maybe this is where the hashes come in or something, like if it's merging against the stale base, then there's a reply back to the agent that says that write wasn't successful. So that's a way to
that's the goal.
Get the agent to retry edits instead of us trying to merge and solve merge conflicts. Just get that information back to the agent, and then the agent can retry, pull new source.
Yeah. And like I think like another part of this is like maybe it just creates a diff, right? So there's like this Jupyter Lab cell diff project. I don't know how like updated that is, but like instead of like maybe by default our tools just always write to that diff, and that diff is stored in the cell metadata. So it's like basically sort of guaranteed that that should always be like accurate, or like that update can always be reconciled, right? Because the user is generally not updating the metadata. So we have two separate hashes per cell. We have like the source code, the source of that cell, and the metadata for that. So even if you edited the source, right, the agent will still be able to suggest a diff.
But the diff may not be accurate anymore, because if the source changes in the meantime, right? If the agent produces the diff for a cell and then the user changes the cell, then the diff does not apply anymore, right? Because
that's fine. You just tell the agent that didn't apply. Try again. Pull the accurate source and try again.
I think the agent literally just writes the new content, and then the diffing UI is shown in the diff is shown like computed on the web client and shown in the UI. Does that make sense? So like you can always add.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you need one more round trip, right? Because otherwise, what you're going to show to the user is not going to be the latest anymore.
Like, the agent could write a diff, and we could tell the agent that diff won't apply because you have a stale base to diff against. And so try again. Can we push more work to the agent, which means that it can't just edit files? But if we push all the conflict resolution and give the agent the feedback about the conflict resolution,
that will be possible.
The main problem in practice is that it makes the agent much slower and annoying to work with.
Because it's not
kind of,
writing to a stale cache, like Vincent's
yeah,
saying.
yeah.
It's interacting with the document model, which requires network round trips.
Or we just make it say that you cannot edit the notebook if the document is dirty, right? That is honestly like, so like I do want to emphasize like all of this conflict resolution stuff, it actually only needs to happen the if the notebook itself is dirty. But if you just simply save the file,
Yeah.
right, before you tell the agent to make edits, it's going to make those like all of those edits can be reconciled with the web client, right? Because it's already compatible, like it's building on
Well,
top of the
but there's a
copy it
race
has on
condition there,
disk.
right? You press save, now it's clean, and you type something in conjunction with the agent editing it. The dirty flag hasn't
Yes,
made it to the backend. Like there's a race condition there, and maybe it's not very prevalent, so we don't have to like worry or design
the
for it too much. But
reconciliation the reconciliation is done on the client side precisely to avoid that race condition.
right, and so then we need
Yeah,
to wait for that reconciliation message, like the failure, success or failure of that
yeah,
reconciliation, to go back to the agent so it knows whether to retry or not.
yeah, yeah. It would need some kind of notification mechanism, like or response, right? Yeah.
So what happened if the UI disconnected from the server for a while and reconnect? During
Thanks,
the agent
Vincent.
is
We really didn't
reconnect.
want more complicated use cases. Just kidding.
No,
Good
I
call.
thought about no, I thought
Because we
about that. I haven't tested it yet, but it should work the exact same. Basically, if it can be reconciled, it's going to be treated like a normal out-of-band change essentially when you reconnect. And if it can be reconciled, it'll get reconciled. And if not, then nothing happens. And when you press save, it's going to say overwrite or revert, basically.
Yeah, and that's where
That's the idea.
my push things to the agent falls down because the agent may not be around. Like if there's a long lag between the writing and the reconciliation, then the agent may not be around anymore to try to retry or whatever. Then you have to decide whether you're going to accept the agent's changes or revert them.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of tricky things to think about.
Is this
Yeah, I
only
mean,
confined to agents writing into notebooks, or is this also affecting like the agent chat and other things?
so this is just affecting agents editing other files. The chat part is like separate. I'm working with Nicola and Jeremy on that. But the chat, we can do it in a way that doesn't require CRDTs because there's not really conflicts to resolve in the chat anyways to begin with. Um, RTC in Jupyter Chat was kind of just like super convenient because we didn't have to define like our own protocol, right? But there is definitely a way to make your own chat without a CRDT.
Okay.
So that part is like it's a lot of work, but it's like fairly straightforward. Yeah. Alrighty. Yeah, lots of discussion. Thank you everyone for your feedback. Yeah. There's a lot to think about and like I think we do need to be maybe this needs more thought, right? Like I think maybe yeah, like again, like the PR I have right now, that is definitely not like something that I think is like ready to merge as is. It's more like I just wanted to show like this can work. And I do think like I could have done a better job by showing up with some demo videos, but I have been working like 12-hour days for the last 2 weeks. So
Next time,
like it's been a
whatever.
little
Yeah,
challenging.
I'm glad you brought it
Yeah,
up
but
early enough that we
yeah,
could have a conversation about it.
yeah, next time. Um, and maybe we have to make it optional, right? I mean, the thing is like you're right, is like having live content updates is not strictly necessary. So maybe if not everyone's confident about it, we make that optional too. And then we can at least ensure the Jupyter AI part, they basically somehow work in a way that's like they work in a way that's like intelligently updating the UI, but without making out of band changes and editing the disk, right? So maybe that's a compromise we make and then make the live content feature optional as well. It's just like this is like something nice to have. But I think probably like I need to focus on a chat more because that's the most critical piece. There's one last thing before we go. I know we're out of time, but there is one last thing I want to call out, which is this like idea behind like a pub sub API for Jupyter Chat. I did some like exploration with this, and I do believe like an API like this, you can represent both the YChat and the WebSocket chat model under the same API. It's pretty general. But I'm still experimenting with this, so like feel free to just like review this later. Just not this is not urgent now. It's more like I think it's a neat concept. You can do a lot with it. You can basically like implement some kind of like awareness like feature without RTC. And it's pretty straightforward. You just like publish and then broadcast messages, and then the last byte wins. So like it's pretty straightforward. Um, but yeah, like
How much overlap is there with the existing Jupyter events system with this PubSub ID?
it's a good call out. I don't know if they support an API like this. Maybe we just use Jupyter events.
Jupyter events lets
Fair.
you broadcast message. This is what is used in this comments toolkit package. You can broadcast events of a
Yeah.
WebSocket. It's been around for
Okay.
quite a
That's a
while.
good call out. We don't need to
Yeah.
build our own pub sub, maybe. Let me take a look into this. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for
but maybe there needs to be something specific to chats, but maybe this could be small plugins then, right? If there is a way to reuse existing APIs.
that would be nice. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that call out. Is there like a corresponding front end to Jupyter events though? Can you listen to Jupyter events on the front end?
Yeah, so there is, let me look it up. So you can use, it's part of the service manager, if I recall correctly. So it's always there. And then there is something that Zach implemented, which is called the Jupyter Lab event listener. I think this is like a very small wrapper around the events API. See,
Yeah.
that is what is used in the comments toolkit package to do this bridge thing. So hang on a
Okay.
second.
Yeah, it would be nice to minimize reinventing things.
So this in the chat, probably have to dig it a bit more, but from what I remember looking at that package a while ago, and it was pretty small and simple. Yeah, it's just connecting to the event manager stream. So I think what he did was something that had maybe a nicer API. Yeah, just adding and removing listeners.
Mm, okay.
But no, otherwise,
Okay.
the Jupyter events should be documented in both Jupyter Server and Jupyter Lab normally.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, maybe we just hold off and maybe for the very short term, right? Like I would like to have a pre-release out within some reasonable, like within like by the end of the week. I'm wondering if this is like maybe some like future work, right? Maybe for now, like in Jupyter AI, we just like try and get something working with this and then upstream it to Jupyter Chat later. I don't know. Let me let me think about this. But yeah, this is a good call out. If we can reuse this, then that would be great, right? Um, yeah. Re-release of Jupyter AI 3.2. Yeah, that's what we want. Well, that's what I personally want. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it would be nice to have a pre-release out by the end of this week so people have plenty of time to test and maybe even do official release by the end of next week. I think it's possible. I mean, like, I don't know. Let's see. Alrighty. Yeah, thanks for feedback, Jeremy. I think yeah, let's oh Kirsty, you had a hand up.
No, let's stop the recording. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, let's
My
do it.
question is, I think, also good for that. That sounds good. Okay. Bye
Yeah.
everyone.
Bye.